Okay, before we start setting up the pages, let's also make a logo component. You see, we will use this image in multiple places, so it kind of makes sense if we would just set up a component where we import the image, we set up the return basically from the component, and then we just import that logo component anywhere where we want to use it. So here are the steps that I'm going to take. I'll create a components folder in the source. In there, I'll create logo.js. I'll import the image. Again, it's the same image. That doesn't change. And I want to set up a return. So logo component, and this is going to export the img. Basically, you will return this image, and then, of course, we'll export the logo. And then we want to get that into the landing.js. Now, also in the components, since there's going to be quite a few components, I'll set up index.js, and in there, I'll import all the components that are in the components folder, and I'll export them from the index.js. And you'll see why it's better in the long run. So first, let's just navigate to our source, I guess. And we want to create that folder. So we're going to go here with components. Then let's create a logo. So let's say over here, logo file. In here, we want to get the image. So we're going to go here with import. And I'll still call this img. But of course, now we have a little bit different path where we want to look for assets. And then more specifically, wrappers, or I'm sorry, not wrappers. What am I talking about? We need to look for images. And then again, we're looking for logo svg. And now let's set up that return. And essentially, we want to return this thing, correct? We want to get that image. So we might as well just cut it out here. Yes, the class name still needs to stay the same. Then let's set up that component. We right away export, and we set it up over here. Now, I said logo, but I actually went with img. So let me save this. And like I said, first, let's just import this into the landing.js. And then I'll show you why I'm going to go with index approach instead. First, let's navigate here. We're not going to need this logo anymore. Now, every time we want a logo, we just grab a component. So let's say here, logo, and then this is coming from the components logo. Let's first render it without it. So as you can see, we have no logo. But then if we add the component, we should see the logo. So our logic didn't change. The only difference is that now, of course, we're importing. So every time we'll need a logo, we'll just grab this component. Now, here's the thing. There's going to be quite a few components in there, in the components folder. And the more components you'll need, well, the more imports you'll have over here, the more lines of code you're going to have. So it is my preference to set up index.js in the folder. In there, I want to get all of the components that I'm going to set up, and I'm going to export them as named exports. And that way, what's going to happen, I'll have only one line of code where I'll say, get me whatever components here from the components folder. So let me showcase how is that going to work. First, I want to go to components. I'm going to go with index.js. And at this point, this is going to be the default export from the component. So the moment we import something from components, we by default will get index.js. So in here, we're going to go with logo. So this is coming from the same directory. So we just go with /logo. And now let's set up that export where I'm going to go with export curly braces and logo. And now if I go back to landing, instead of logo in such manner, I'm going to go with named import. We'll save it. Now, at this point, it's complaining that I cannot find it because in here I still have the logo. So like I said, once we set up the index.js, we don't need to anymore point to a specific file because this is going to be the default one. So as we're going to be creating more and more components in the components folder, we'll set up the imports over here. We're going to export them in the bottom. And then any file that is going to be looking for that component, we'll just say import whatever the name in here. So of course we can change it here and all kinds of things, but we'll for the most part keep the same name. And then we just go with components. And then let's say if I have 20 of them, I'll still have technically only one line of code where I'll say comma, next component, comma, next component. And if some of this is fuzzy, don't worry. Once we're done with few components, you'll have a very good idea how this type of setup works.